What if our moon was hollow? Would we be able to hide inside in case some terrible catastrophe destroyed our home planet? Well, the supporters of the hollow moon theory believe that it's actually a real option. The hollow moon is a hypothesis claiming that Earth's moon is either completely hollow or has quite a lot of place inside. The thing is, the moon is less dense than Earth, and it seems to support the idea of its hollowness. But according to science, the reason is the fact that Earth's upper mantle and crust are less dense than the heavy iron core of our planet. Then, there's also the claim that the moon rings like a bell. For almost a decade, between 1969 and 1977, seismometers installed on the moon by the Apollo missions kept recording moonquakes. The moon was reported to be ringing like a bell during such quakes, especially shallow ones. On the 20th of November, 1969, Apollo 12 deliberately crashed the ascent stage of its lunar module into the surface of our natural satellite. According to NASA, after that, the ringing continued for almost an hour. This made some people argue that the moon must be hollow like a bell. Later, lunar seismology researched those shallow moonquakes and showed that they acted differently than quakes on our planet, mostly due to differences in type, texture, and density of the lunar and Earth's rock layers. The speed of sound waves in solids is determined by the medium's compressibility and density. No one has ever found any evidence of a large empty space inside the moon. And still, in 1970, Michael Vasson and Alexander Sherbakov suggested a hypothesis that the moon could be a spaceship designed by mysterious extraterrestrial beings. In 1965, writer Isaac Asimov made an observation that added fuel to the fire of conspiracy theories. He marveled at the sheer astronomical accident that the moon fits so snugly over the sun during total eclipses. The sun's greater distance makes up for the incomparably larger size of the star. As a result, it seems to us that the moon and the sun are the same size. The author added that there was no astronomical reason why the sun and the moon should fit so well. So since the 1970s, conspiracy theorists have been quoting Asimov's words about solar eclipses as evidence of the artificial origin of the moon. Mainstream astronomers disagree with such an interpretation, saying that the angular diameters of the moon and the sun don't perfectly match during eclipses. They vary by several percent over time. Many other pieces of evidence confirm that the moon is a solid body that formed after a planetoid crashed into Earth. In the past, scientists thought that the moon appeared after our rapidly spinning planet got rid of a good chunk of its mass. This idea was suggested in 1879 by George Darwin, the son of the very Charles Darwin, the famous biologist. This theory remained popular until the Apollo missions. Then, in 1925, Austrian geologist Otto Ampferer offered another idea, that Earth and the moon could have formed together from a primordial accretion disk, a rotating disk of dense gas and dust surrounding a young, newly formed star, and used to be a double system. The third theory stated that the moon could have once been a planetoid caught by the gravity of our planet. The modern explanation usually involves the giant impact hypothesis. According to it, a Mars-sized space body hit Earth and created a debris ring around our planet. In the end, this ring gathered into a single natural satellite, our moon. But getting back to the hollow moon theory, at the moment, there's no scientific evidence to support this hypothesis. Seismic observations and other data indicate that the moon has a solid interior with several layers, a thin crust, quite extensive mantle, and a dense core. These days, the idea of the hollow moon is considered to be a conspiracy theory.
Soon we might start constructing loads of stuff on the moon. All because India's moon mission has recently detected sulfur near the moon's south pole. This chemical element can come in extremely handy for creating infrastructure on our satellite. It's the first time this chemical element has been discovered on Earth's natural satellite. This sought-after element is mostly found near Earth's volcanoes. Its appearance on the moon speaks volumes about the satellite's volcanic history and its past atmospheric conditions. The mission's rover detected this chemical element less than a week after touching down around 70 degrees from the moon's south pole on the 23rd of August, 2023. This historic landing on the lunar surface made India the fourth country to safely land a mission on the moon. It's also the first spacecraft to touch down so close to the south pole of our satellite. It's an area of strategic importance because it's believed to be home to deposits of water ice. If it turns out to be true, future missions might be able to harvest it and turn this water ice into drinking water or even rocket fuel. For 2 weeks, the lander carried out the data collection, mainly focused on the analysis of the moon's soil and its extremely thin atmosphere. Meanwhile, the solar-powered Pragyan rover started its quest to find frozen water on the moon. As for the lander, it demonstrated another amazing feat on the 3rd of September. The spacecraft fired up its engines and lifted itself for about 16 inches into the air. Then it made a tiny hop to land 12 to 16 inches away from its original position. It's kinda a big deal. Being able to get a lander back off the surface of the moon is essentially for future missions, showing that they can safely return soil samples or even astronauts back home after a lunar mission. In September, the Indian spacecraft was put into sleeping mode. The 14-day-long lunar night was approaching, and the spacecraft wasn't designed to collect scientific data during this period of time. So far, we've learned about a few major findings of the mission. One is related to measuring the temperature of the moon's topsoil at different depths. Intriguingly, the surface of the satellite in that region turned out to be hotter than expected. It was believed that the temperature could be between 68 and 86 degrees Fahrenheit on the surface, but it was around 158 degrees Fahrenheit, way hotter than it should be. The other discovery indicates the presence of several chemical elements, including oxygen. Besides, the data received from the spacecraft confirms the presence of aluminum, calcium, iron, titanium, silicon, and other chemical elements on the lunar surface close to the South Pole. The rover also used special instruments designed to measure quakes and rumbles beneath the lunar surface to detect some seismic activity. It brings us back to the sulfur detected thanks to the rover's spectroscope. Scientists are currently working on figuring out whether this element formed on the surface in a natural way or whether it's the result of volcanic activity or a meteor strike. Another astonishing thing found on the moon is a rock, and it may be the oldest known Earth rock. A 0.7-inch wide chip included in a large rock collection brought to our planet by Apollo astronauts might actually be a 4-billion-year-old fragment of Earth. This finding could help us paint a better picture of the intense pounding early Earth got at the dawn of its life. It could go like this. Soon after the rock formed, an asteroid impact might have blasted it from Earth. At that time, our planet's satellite was 3 times closer to Earth than it is today. The collision was so powerful that this chunk of terrestrial rock found its way to the moon. Later, this fragment got engulfed in a lunar breccia, a motley kind of rock. Eventually, the rock was brought back home to Earth by Apollo 14 astronauts. Even though scientists had found meteorites coming from Mars and the moon before, it was the first time a rock from the moon turned out to be a terrestrial meteorite. They also found out that the rock had formed in a water-rich environment at temperatures and pressures corresponding to those at around 12 miles beneath the surface of our planet. In 2019, China's Chang'e 4 mission made history by landing on the far side of the moon. The mission's rover helped researchers visualize structures hidden deep below the surface of the satellite, revealing billions of years of lunar history. The Yutu-2 rover made this discovery with the help of its lunar-penetrating radar. It imaged deep into the moon's surface and listened to echoes of sound bouncing back off structures hidden from view under the surface of the moon. It turned out those structures were resting at depths of almost 1,000 feet. The research suggests that the first 130 feet under the surface are made up of layers of dust, soil, and rocks. The instruments also discovered a concealed crater that must have formed after a large object slammed into the moon's surface. Long, long ago, ancient lava was likely to be flowing deep underground. Researchers believe that the broken rocks around the formation might be debris produced by the impact. They also found that the volcanic rock layers were thinner the closer they were to the surface. Such a thickness variation of lava flows might mean a decrease in the number and magnitude of eruptions over time. So, lunar volcanic activity gradually dwindled since the moon's formation around 4.5 billion years ago. On the far side of the moon, there is one of the largest and oldest impact craters in our solar system, the South Pole Aitken Basin. Unfortunately, from Earth, you can only see its outer rim, which looks like a huge chain of mountains. It's a ginormous 8-mile deep dent, stretching for more than 1,500 miles in diameter and covering 1/4 of the moon's surface. Astronomers are sure that this crater appeared when an asteroid collided with the moon around 4 billion years ago. And now, look at this gigantic chunk of metal the size of 4 states of Connecticut. As for its weight in pounds, it's enough to say that the number contains 18 zeros. This mysterious mass is hidden about 180 miles under the moon's surface, somewhere in the middle of the South Pole Aitken Basin. It was discovered when GRAIL, which stands for NASA's Gravity Recovery and Interior Laboratory Mission, gathered data about our natural satellite. When examining this information, scientists noticed that in one place on the moon's surface, there was a weird change in gravity. After researching this phenomenon, they concluded that something mysterious was weighing down the basin floor there. So far, researchers haven't figured out the origin of the bizarre lump, but there are several theories. One of them claims that the finding is a chunk of dense oxide, which appeared when the moon was just taking its shape. At that time, the satellite was still covered with ancient oceans of magma, and the lump could be formed at the final stages of its cooling. However, most scientists support another theory, according to which the puzzling mass is part of the giant asteroid that once created the South Pole Aitken Basin. Since the thing is metallic, it's probably the iron-nickel core of the asteroid. There might be a labyrinth of lava tubes on the moon. Not so long ago, astronomers received the results of underground topography and discovered a massive cave under the surface of Earth's satellite. It could be the result of the lunar volcanic activity that happened more than 3 billion years ago. Streams of lava hardened, creating a thick, hard crust on the outside. But inside, it kept flowing, melting the rock and creating tunnels and caves. Numerous small pits in the moon's surface discovered by NASA seem to be the openings to such lava tubes. If this theory is confirmed, the underground tunnels might serve not only as a convenient location for human-crewed space missions, but also as much-needed water sources for astronauts.
What if we built a huge tower on the moon? A tower that could provide future missions with light, power, and guidance technologies that could help astronauts explore our natural satellite. It's not something from a sci-fi book. It's a novel idea from Honeybee Robotics, one of the brightest space technology companies. The lunar utility navigation with advanced remote sensing and autonomous beaming for energy redistribution, or simply Lunar Saber, is a 328 tall pole. It's capable of holding 1 ton of equipment on top of it. But how could we build such a giant construction? No rocket would be able to hold and land such a giant pole on the moon. And building such a tower on the lunar surface without already existing infrastructure would be next to impossible. So, Honeybee might use the deployable interlocking actuated bands for linear operations Diablo system. It uses a rolled piece of metal and bends it into a deployable cylindrical structure that can support really heavy payloads. It would be easier to build it on the moon because gravity there is only 16% of that on Earth. The structure could serve as the base for Lunar Saber. Power is crucial on the moon, so putting solar panels along the sides of the pole would be super useful. The company is now discussing two types of solar panels. The first one is like a yo-yo extended from the top payload holder of the tower. It would envelop the metallic structure and allow access to the sun at all angles. The second option might involve the top part of the tower. It could deploy its booms to hold traditional solar panels and then track the sun. Power supply wouldn't be the only Lunar Saber's task. It would also be able to beam power to other devices, track other devices, and provide communication, light, and energy. Let's talk about these functions in more detail. If one mast of the pole was bathing in sunlight while another was lingering in shadow, the one with excess power would be able to beam power to the one lacking it. Plus, similar power beaming could happen between Lunar Saber and rovers and astronauts in spacesuits. To beam all that power effectively, though, the tower would need to know the precise location of those objects. That's where the second technology would come in. Lunar Saber could use a set of sensors to find and track other objects. Basically, anything in a direct line of sight could be tracked and powered by the tower itself. Lunar Saber could also act as a lunar cell phone tower. It would allow wireless communication in its network. And finally, it would be super helpful for astronauts to actually see where they would be going. Rovers wouldn't need to wait out the 2-week lunar darkness. Floodlights at the top of the tower could provide enough visible light for astronauts and rovers, which would allow them to effectively perform their activities at all times. But guess what? The tower could become even more useful. We could combine several towers in a mesh. It would allow astronauts to communicate more effectively. Plus, power could be beamed even from the other side of the moon. It would enable two main applications that have been a thorn in lunar exploration's side so far: constant communication with Earth and constant supply of solar power. The thing is, explorations on the other side of the moon are quite tricky, which limits the area of scientific research to the side directly facing Earth. But a strategically placed mesh of lunar sabers could allow communication back to Earth, and we would be able to explore the dark side of the moon. Since at least half of our natural satellite is always lit up, if we placed lunar sabers correctly around the surface of the moon, there would always be at least one bathing in sunlight. That one sunlit tower would then wirelessly transmit power to others in its line of sight. This process would keep going until power was beamed to the main astronauts' base, supplying them with power even in the cold lunar darkness. Unfortunately, at the moment, such technologies look unrealistic. We're not close to having wireless energy transmission over long distances. Even on Earth, we still need to use batteries and wires. It might be easier to launch many satellites into orbit around the moon than to create a network of giant communication towers.
Count how many times the word moon is said in this video. Enjoy! There might be moons out there in space. These are moons orbiting other moons. Online, these fascinating hypothetical space objects have already been nicknamed submoons, grand moons, moonitos, moonates, and even moons. They might not exist in our solar system or any other. But some astronomers claim that the concept of a moon bringing up its own baby moon is quite plausible. The thing is, in all planetary systems we know about, natural satellites occur in a strict order. Planets orbit stars, and moons move around planets. But then, why can't submoons orbit moons? Take Earth's natural satellite. It's so massive that some astronomers even want to call it a planet in its own right. Then why shouldn't this planet-sized moon have its own satellite? In a new paper, a couple of researchers looked for a mathematical answer to the puzzle of moons. Using special equations created to show the tidal effects of planets on their moons, the scientists determined that submoons could exist if the host moon was massive enough and the submoon was small enough. Plus, there should be a wide orbital gap between these two moons and the host planet. This way, a 6-mile wide submoon could only survive moving around a 600-mile wide moon on a wide separation orbit. If these parameters are not met, the tidal forces of the host planet would be too powerful and would smash the moon and the moon together. Or these forces would be too weak to keep the submoon, and it would get jettisoned into space. Based on these conditions, there are quite a few natural satellites in our solar system that could hypothetically host baby moons of their own. These could be Saturn's moons Titan and Iapetus, Jupiter's satellite called Callisto, and our moon. Yes, our own moon could have its own tiny satellite. Why doesn't it? The researchers haven't found the answer to this question yet. The existence, or lack thereof, of moons may shed light on satellite formation and evolution in planetary systems. But once we find the answers we're looking for, the next logical question may arise. Can a moon have a moon of its own? If so, what name would be the most suitable for such a space body? A great grand moon? Write your variants in the comments. Besides hypothetical moons, there are loads of other bizarre things in the universe, the existence of which we haven't proven yet. Hypothetical nuclear pasta is one of them. If it does exist, nuclear pasta is the strongest material in the entire universe. It forms from the leftovers of extinguished stars when this substance gets squeezed into spaghetti-like tangles of material. It can theoretically break, but according to estimates, it could only happen if you applied 10 billion times the pressure you'd need to shatter steel. Then, there's dark matter and dark energy. We kinda know these things exist, but no one has seen them yet. Everything on Earth, and everything people can observe in space with the help of telescopes and other instruments is normal matter. It's made up of atoms and molecules and adds up to less than 5% of the universe. Almost 3/4 of the universe is dark energy. Astronomers wouldn't even know the thing existed if several decades ago they hadn't found out that the expansion of the universe wasn't slowing down. Quite the opposite. It was accelerating. It meant there had to be some enigmatic force that counteracted gravity. It was dubbed dark energy. As for about 27% of the remaining universe, it's believed that it's made up of dark matter. If dark energy is a force responsible for the expansion of the universe, dark matter is supposed to explain how objects work together. Potential candidates for dark matter vary from strange particles to super dim objects. But even though astronomers can't grasp what exactly dark matter is, they know for sure what it isn't. It's dark, which means we can rule out visible stars and planets. It also can't be dark clouds of normal matter, otherwise, scientists would be able to detect it. Dark matter is not antimatter. Astronomers don't see unique gamma rays that appear when antimatter comes in contact with matter. And neither is dark matter gigantic, galaxy-sized black holes.
Technological progress does not stand still, and over the past decade, the resolution of images of the lunar surface has improved greatly. Many pits have been discovered on the surface, and some of them are really impressive in size. The largest are hundreds of feet deep. However, technology is not yet advanced enough for us to study the bottom of such pits in detail. That's why a recent discovery is surprising. It turns out that huge pits can extend deep into the rock of the moon. It's a groundbreaking discovery. Let's figure out why. So look at this giant underground cave. Leonardo Carrere and Lorenzo Bruzone from the University of Trento were thrilled to finally confirm the existence of such structures on the moon. They analyzed images taken by the mini RF instrument on board the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter in 2010. The original images didn't have excellent resolution, so the authors had to do a huge amount of work, using modern data analysis and modeling techniques. But first things first, why does it all matter so much? Well, instead of building homes on the surface of the moon, we might be able to live inside these natural caves. They could offer protection from dangerous things like harmful space radiation, extreme temperature swings, and even meteorites. According to planetary geologist Wes Patterson from Johns Hopkins, even though we'd still have to bring materials from Earth to make those caves habitable, using them would be a lot easier and cheaper than building bases on the surface. Based on the collected data, the cave is about 150 feet wide and up to 260 feet long, which is just a bit smaller than a football field. It's located in a deep pit called the Mare Tranquillitatis Pit, which likely formed when an ancient lava tube collapsed. Although the moon has no active volcanoes today, billions of years ago, its surface was covered with lava that flowed through valleys. carving out these tubes below the surface. Over time, some of the lava tubes became unstable and collapsed, creating pits like the one in question. NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter, LRO, has already found more than 200 of such pits on the moon. It means there could be hundreds of hidden caves waiting to be explored on our satellite. When publishing their findings in Nature Astronomy, the researchers suggested that the caves could offer future astronauts a safe place to live and work, protecting them from the moon's extreme conditions. And extreme they are. One of the biggest challenges of living on the moon is its temperatures. The lunar surface gets extremely hot during the day, reaching about 250 degrees Fahrenheit, and then the temperature drops below minus 200 degrees Fahrenheit at night. But inside the caves, the temperature could stay much more consistent. A separate study done in 2022 used computer simulations to predict that some of those caves could maintain a comfortable temperature of about 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Much easier to manage, right? Unfortunately, getting to the caves won't be easy. The Mare Tranquillitatis cave is over 400 feet below the surface, at the bottom of a steep slope covered in loose debris. It would take some clever engineering to get up and down that slope. The options could be using jetpacks, a lunar elevator, or some other kind of technology. We must find a way to transport astronauts safely. There's also a lot more to discover. Radar technology could help scientists find even more caves and lava tubes on the moon. In the future, a spacecraft with higher resolution radar could even map the insides of the pits that LRO has already found. According to the researchers, this kind of complete survey could help them figure out the best locations for future lunar bases and other explorations. And there's another potential bonus. Those caves could contain water. Scientists have already found frozen water on the moon, under the surface, and in permanently shadowed craters. Tiny amounts are also scattered across the lunar dirt. Water is a critical resource for any moon base, and finding it in the caves could make the idea of living there even more realistic. All in all, this discovery could be a game changer for lunar exploration. Living in natural caves on the moon might be a more practical and safer option than building something on the surface. It could also bring us one step closer to making the moon a place where humans can live and work for the long term.
There are a few theories about how the moon appeared in the sky, and recently a new idea has popped up. But before we discuss this newcomer, let's look at the most popular hypotheses of the moon's formation. The capture theory claims that Earth's natural satellite used to be a wandering body, something like a large asteroid. It had formed somewhere else in the solar system before it was captured by our planet's gravity when passing nearby. The accretion hypothesis suggests that the moon formed in orbit around Earth at the same time as our planet appeared in the darkness of the cosmos. Then, there's the fission theory that says that at one point in its development, Earth was spinning so fast that some of its material broke away and started to orbit the planet. And the giant impact theory, which is the most popular these days, claims that the moon formed during a collision between Earth and another hypothetical planet called Theia, which was way smaller, probably the size of Mars. The resulting debris collected in an orbit around Earth and formed the moon. And now, let's move to the new theory you've been patiently waiting for. According to it, our satellite might have formed immediately, in a matter of hours, after the collision between Earth and Theia. The material from the two planets was likely launched directly into Earth's orbit right after the impact. It formed the moon and left traces deep inside Earth. In previous scenarios, Theia's remains were thought to have been scattered all over space, mixing with just a bit of the material coming from our own planet. But then, why do we see such shocking similarities between the moon's and Earth's compositions? Could it be that Theia was isotonically and chemically similar to Earth? Unlikely. But according to the new theory, more material from Earth was used to create the moon, its outer layers in particular. It might explain this similarity in composition. One more theory also tries to explain this mysterious similarity, the synestia model. According to it, our satellite formed inside a swirl of vaporized rock left by the collision. But this theory can't explain the moon's current orbit. The new single-stage theory does offer us plausible explanations for both the similarities in composition and the orbit of the moon. It might also provide us with some answers to previously unsolved mysteries. Since this scenario puts the moon into a wider orbit and gives it an interior that is not fully molten, it can explain the satellite's tilted orbit and thin crust. In any case, to confirm one of these theories, we need to analyze future lunar samples that will be brought to Earth by NASA's upcoming Artemis missions. Scientists will be able to get their hands on some material from deeper beneath the moon's surface and compare if real data matches these simulated scenarios. In the past, the Apollo missions already brought back about 1/3 of a ton of rock and soil from our satellite. These samples showed that Earth and the moon had some remarkable chemical similarities. They could only suggest one thing. These space objects had a linked history. If the moon had formed elsewhere and been captured by our planet's gravity later on, its composition would be very different from that of Earth. But if the moon had been created at the same time as Earth, or if it had broken off our planet, the type and proportion of minerals on the moon would be the same as on Earth. But they are a bit different. The moon's minerals contain less water than their terrestrial counterparts. The satellite is also richer in materials that form rapidly at high temperatures. That's why the most accepted model of the moon's formation these days is the giant impact model. Meteorites coming from the moon are a great source of data for studying the origins of our satellite too. They can tell us even more about the moon than Apollo samples, all because such meteorites come from all over the surface of the moon. Meanwhile, Apollo samples were collected just in one place near the equator, on the near side of the moon.
You hear some noise in the street and rush up to the window to check what caused it. You look up at the sky and just stand there, speechless. The moon is giant. It looks much larger than usual, and it's both beautiful and scary. So what would your life be like if the moon moved twice as close to Earth as it is now? Unfortunately, it would be quite a catastrophic scenario. You see, the moon has a pretty strong gravitational pull on Earth's oceans. It produces 2 high tides and 2 low tides per day. But with the moon so close to us, the tides would get 8 times higher. Some regions would be completely covered with water during the day. The water would only retreat at night. Many islands and highly populated coastline territories would become uninhabited because of this. Many other regions would experience frequent devastating floods. But if you think it would be the only consequence, let me tell you this. The moon also has a tidal effect on dry land. That's why if our planet's natural satellite was to suddenly relocate, its gravitational pull would increase, making waves of energy reverberate throughout the planet. This would affect Earth's crust, triggering earthquakes and starting volcanic eruptions. Now let's leave Earth and the giant moon for a while and have a look at Jupiter's moon, Io, which is the most volcanically active world in our solar system. This volcanism comes from the push and pull from Jupiter's gravity. 2 other moons of the gas giant also have an effect on poor Io. That's why Io's surface is littered with hundreds of volcanoes. Most of them are spewing sulfurous plumes high above the surface of the moon. Our planet might face the same fate should the moon move so close to it. And that's not all. Earth's spin would start to slow down over time. Look, the moon's gravity pulls the oceans, and the resulting friction between the water and the ocean floor slows Earth's spin. Yes, Earth is slowing down even now as you're watching this video, but this process is almost imperceptible, around 1,000th of a second per century. If the moon was twice as close to us, the rotation of our planet would slow much more, making days and nights longer. If people managed to survive unexpected earthquakes, high tides, and volcanic eruptions and got used to longer days and nights, they would get an award. Solar eclipses. These spectacular events that occur when the moon passes between the sun and Earth would happen much more frequently. Since the moon would cover a much larger area in the sky, it would pass in front of the sun more often. people on Earth would be able to see the sun's outer atmosphere, called the corona. It would shine beautifully around the silhouette of the moon. Such solar eclipses would also last much longer. But what if the moon didn't shorten the distance overnight? What if it was a much slower and much more gradual process? Then our planet's crust would shift more slowly. Tides wouldn't change so dramatically either. This would let living creatures on the planet get used to the new conditions and adjust in time. Longer days and nights would likely change the climate, and animals would have to evolve to adapt to it. Their eyes would have to change to be able to deal with brighter moonlight at night. Prey would have to learn to hide better, but predators, on the other hand, would have more advantages when hunting. But what catastrophe would have to happen to make the moon move so close to Earth? Well, it could be some massive object, like a giant asteroid passing very close to the Earth-Moon system. If the moon was in the way of this space traveler, it could take energy from Earth's satellite, which would cause the moon to spiral towards our planet.
There are several places on Earth, awesome and mysterious, that evoke so many questions that some people believe they were built by or with the help of extraterrestrial intelligence. Let's explore those mystical destinations. In the hills above Cusco, Peru, you'll find an ancient Inca fortress called Sacsayhuaman. Some of the massive stones of its walls weigh as much as 360 tons. They're cut and fitted together surprisingly precisely, and no mortar is used. The stones used for this construction were transported over 20 miles from quarries. But how did the Inca do it? Did they ask for extraterrestrial help? Perhaps. But archaeologists disagree. They have found evidence that the Inca used advanced engineering techniques involving ropes and levers to move and fit the stones. Okay, let's move on to the Nazca lines. You can see them in the deserts of southern Peru. In this area, more than 800 lines and 300 shapes stretch across the deserted landscape. Those are called geoglyphs and are best viewed from the sky. That's how theories about alien involvement popped up. The lines were made by removing the top layer of reddish rocks to reveal the lighter ground beneath. And this is a pretty simple technique. You don't even need to use modern tools. The purpose of the Nazca lines is still a mystery, but most experts believe that they had some ceremonial significance. Now, the stone circle of Stonehenge must have something to do with extraterrestrial visitors, right? Those stones, some weighing as much as 50 tons, were brought from quarries hundreds of miles away. No wonder many people offered theories about alien intervention. Well, sorry to disappoint you, but archaeologists have proven that the monument could have actually been built with the help of technologies available around 5,000 years ago, such as wooden sleds and rollers. The exact purpose of Stonehenge is still under debate. Its builders could have used the stone circle to track the sun or to perform astronomy-related rituals. The next breath-stopping place on our list is the Egyptian pyramids, namely the pyramids of Giza just outside Cairo. They were built over 4,500 years ago. The largest of them, the Great Pyramid, is made of millions of 2-ton stones which are arranged with super precision. The pyramids also align with the stars of Orion's belt, and this makes some people believe that aliens might have helped to build these awe-inspiring constructions. Experts disagree. They say that although the exact methods the Egyptian builders used are still unclear, the pyramids are undoubtedly a human achievement. Ramps, levers, and a large workforce were likely used to move the stones into place. Then, how about Teotihuacan, located near modern-day Mexico City? Once, it was a thriving metropolis. The city was built more than 2,000 years ago, and its size and advanced architecture make people wonder if aliens played a key role in its construction. In reality, the city was created by several cultures, including the Maya and Zapotec. It was a center for trade, agriculture, and other activities, but it does have some connection to space. Its layout, with the pyramids aligned to celestial events, shows a deep understanding of astronomy. And still, it was the work of human hands. Now, let's travel to one of the most mysterious islands in the world, Easter Island. Nearly 900 stone figures known as moai stand there, some towering over 30 feet tall. These statues were carved from volcanic rock more than 1,000 years ago and moved across the island to their final resting places. This impressive feat, as well as the slightly creepy appearance of the figures, makes you think about some alien intervention, doesn't it? Well, another disappointment. It's believed that the Rapa Nui people used wooden sleds or rolling logs to transport the statues, and there's no evidence that extraterrestrials were involved. The last destination isn't even on Earth. In 1976, NASA's Viking 1 orbiter captured an image of what seemed to be a face on Mars. It sparked numerous theories about alien activity. The face seems to be staring up from the Martian surface, like evidence of the activity of an ancient alien civilization. But more detailed images from 2001, taken by the Mars Global Surveyor, revealed that the so-called face was just a natural mesa, an isolated flat-topped hill with steep sides. Let me tell you about one of the wildest UFO stories out there. The case of Antonio Villas Boas, a Brazilian farmer. He claimed he had been abducted by aliens in 1957. He was 23 at the time, working in the fields one night when he saw a strange red light in the sky. That light? According to him, it was an alien spaceship. He said the ship had landed and weird-looking 5-foot-tall aliens grabbed him, took him inside, and covered him in a bizarre, yucky gel. Then, things got even more alarming. Antonio claimed he had been taken to a room where extraterrestrials had taken samples of his blood, and then he had been left alone with a female alien. According to Antonio, she had white hair, red body hair, and cat-like blue eyes. Afterward, she pointed upward. The man thought that she meant she'd have their child in space. The aliens then gave Antonio a quick tour of their ship. But when he tried to take a souvenir, they stopped him. After about 4 hours or so, the man was released and could observe the spaceship fly away. Interestingly, Antonio stuck to his story throughout his whole life. Some people are sure that he made it all up, while others believe the encounter really did happen. One of the strangest things about this story is that right after the events, Boas started complaining of feeling weakness and nausea. He also suffered from headaches and lesions on the skin. Strangely, they appeared without any kind of bruising. After the farmer was examined, he found out that he had been exposed to a large dose of radiation from some unidentified source. His symptoms were those of mild radiation sickness. So whether you believe Antonio's story or not, it is still one of the most famous alien abduction cases out there. But how does science explain all these? Let's break down several explanations. Back in 1980, a researcher named Keith Basterfield suggested that some alien abduction cases might just be hallucinations. He and psychologist Dr. Robert Bartholomew even came up with the idea that people who reported abductions might be fantasy-prone, meaning they could have a hard time telling the difference between their imagination and reality. In 2011, scientists at the Phase Research Center took things a step further by using lucid dreaming to simulate alien encounters. They found that volunteers who were aware they were dreaming could actually create abduction-like experiences. In fact, 75% of the volunteers had dreams that felt just like encounters with aliens. Another explanation involves the phenomenon of sleep paralysis. Many people, about 40%, experience sleep paralysis at least once in their lives. When this happens, they can have vivid dreams, and sometimes those dreams involve aliens. The combination of a super realistic dream and being unable to move can easily convince someone that they were abducted. Some experts think alien abductions might be linked to mental trauma. For example, D. Scott Rogo, editor of the magazine Fate, suggested that people who claim to have been abducted could be dealing with personal crises or recovering from past trauma. Such cases might also be false memories from hypnosis. Regressive hypnosis is a controversial technique used to uncover lost memories of alien abductions. While some believe it can help people recall genuine experiences, critics argue that it often leads to false memories. Hypnotists might accidentally suggest ideas during the session, leading people to believe something happened that never actually did. Studies have shown that around 50% of memories recovered through this method are likely made up. So, whether it's dreams, hallucinations, or false memories, there are plenty of theories explaining why some people genuinely believe they've been abducted by aliens.
On July 23, 2024, Europe's Solar Orbiter spacecraft observed a super powerful solar flare erupting from the far side of the Sun. This flare wasn't the most extreme ever recorded, but still, we got extremely lucky this time not to get fried by it. Such solar flares often cause long-lived, raging radiation storms, and if such a storm moves in the direction of Earth, it can lead to worldwide blackouts. Before we go deeper into details of that potentially disastrous solar flare, we need to figure out what exactly this solar phenomenon is. Solar flares occur because the magnetic fields in the atmosphere of our star are moving non-stop. When the Sun is approaching its solar maxima, and that's the most active period of its 11-year-long cycle, which is, by the way, exactly what's happening now, its magnetic fields get more and more tangled, making our star look like an enormous ball of tangled rubber bands. They loop around, cross over one another, cut one another off, and then reconnect. Ever seen iron filings sprinkled on a bar magnet? These filings line up along the magnetic lines of force. Like that, the hot plasma on the surface of the Sun is at the mercy of the magnetic lines of force. Sometimes, when the magnetic fields interact with each other, some plasma gets disconnected from the fields, and its particles accelerate to immense speeds and send powerful radiation to space. That's what a solar flare is. Other times, our star throws off massive amounts of matter. Those events are coronal mass ejections, CMEs. Just one CME can contain as much as 20 billion tons of material. If that material were rock, it would create a mountain about 2.75 miles across and almost a half a mile tall. The ejected material often travels at a speed of over 1,000,000 miles per hour. Solar flares and CMEs are the most powerful explosions in the solar system, releasing unimaginable amounts of energy. Solar flares have their own classification according to their strength. The smallest and weakened ones are A and B class. Then there are C and M class solar flares, and the strongest are X class flares. A number from 1 to 9, and in some cases a larger one, accompanies each letter. That's similar to the Richter scale for earthquakes. A and B class flares are too weak to affect our planet. As for C class flares, they may have small, noticeable consequences. M class flares can cause short radio blackouts at the poles and weak radiation storms that can still harm astronauts. But the most dangerous of them all are X class flares. These are flares more than 10 times more powerful than X1. That's why the classification of X class flares can go higher than 9. Now let's get back to that recent solar flare. It was X14 class 1. Now, we already know that it means it was an extra strong flare. Other large flares astronomers have detected recently include an X12 solar flare that happened on the 20th of May and an X10 flare that occurred on the 17th of July. All of them have come from the backside of the Sun. If we talk of the Earth side of our star, the largest solar flare that has been recorded so far within this solar cycle happened on the 14th of May. It was an X8.7 flare that led to radio blackouts, and a strong geomagnetic storm leading to magnificent auroras all over the world occurred a few days earlier. Powerful coronal mass ejections accompanied this storm. As for the July X-class flare, it was so powerful that it could have ended up tragically for us. Luckily, all that magnetically charged plasma blast that accompanied the flare didn't travel in our direction. If it had, it would have been quite the solar storm. Auroras would have been incredibly impressive and a wee bit terrifying in their magnificence. But at the same time, such a dynamic blast of energetic particles hurtling our way could have caused major technological problems and electrical blackouts, like the event in 1989, which severely harmed Quebec's power grid, or a much earlier catastrophe that still managed to cause a lot of harm to the world. I'm talking about the Carrington event, which occurred in 1859 and was the first documented solar flare affecting our planet. It happened on the 1st of September and was named after Richard Carrington, the solar astronomer who witnessed the flare through his own telescope and sketched the Sun's sunspots. According to scientists, that flare was the most powerful documented solar storm over the last 500 years. The Carrington event triggered auroras that were visible as far south as the Caribbean. It led to severe interruptions in telegraph services all over the world, even shocking some telegraph operators and sparking fires after discharges from the lines ignited telegraph paper. Another major solar flare that erupted on the 4th of August, 1972, destroyed long-distance phone communication across a few states, including Illinois. This event even made the American Telephone and Telegraph Company redesign its power system for transatlantic cables. Now let's move to March 1985, when two super-powerful CMEs triggered a geomagnetic storm, which, in turn, set off a power blackout in Canada on the 13th of March. This blackout left around 6 million people without electricity for 9 hours. It is said that the flare disrupted electric power transmission from the Hydro-Quebec generation station and melted a few power transformers in New Jersey. And still, this solar flare was nowhere near the power of the Carrington event. The Bastille Day solar storm took its name from the French national holiday because it occurred on the same day, on the 14th of July in the year 2000. It was an X5 class event that caused some satellites to short-circuit and resulted in radio blackouts. It's still one of the most highly observed solar storm events. From October to November 2003, our star unleashed a series of large solar flares and coronal mass ejections, and they did reach Earth and slam into our atmosphere. Those solar storms, also known as Halloween storms of 2003, caused aircraft to be rerouted, impacted satellite systems, and led to power outages in Sweden. Besides, the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory couldn't fulfill its functions during this solar onslaught. On the 28th of October 2003, the Sun sent a whopper of a solar flare our way. The fire was so powerful it overwhelmed the spacecraft sensor that was measuring it. The sensor topped out at a whopping X28. But later, scientists figured out that the flare had reached a peak strength of about X45. One more thing that made the Halloween storms so scary was that they happened during a time in the solar cycle when solar activity is usually quiet. That's 2 to 3 years after the solar maximum. According to NASA's statistics, just 17 powerful flares erupted from our star during that time. The Sun spewed out another X-class solar flare on the 5th of December 2006. It was an X9-class flare that disrupted satellite-to-ground communications and GPS navigational signals for around 10 minutes. That solar storm was so powerful it even damaged the Solar X-ray Imager instrument on the GOES 13 satellite. It sustained damage to several pixels of its detector. In February 2022, SpaceX experienced the terrifying power of our star when a devastating geomagnetic storm destroyed 38 Starlink satellites worth tens of millions of dollars. It happened shortly after they were deployed. Unfortunately, Starlink satellites are especially vulnerable to geomagnetic storms since they're released into extremely low-altitude orbits, between 60 and 120 miles. They also rely on their onboard engines to overcome the drag force and raise themselves to their final altitude of around 350 miles over the surface of our planet. The thing is, during a geomagnetic storm, Earth's atmosphere absorbs energy from the storm, heats up, and extends upwards. It results in a denser thermosphere, which means more drag, and it can be a serious issue for satellites. That's exactly what happened. The batch of newly released Starlink satellites didn't manage to overcome the increased drag and started to fall back, eventually burning up in the atmosphere. Very recently, astronomers have found 3 potential super-Earth planets orbiting a somewhat close orange dwarf star. The term super-Earth is used to describe a planet beyond the solar system with a mass higher than that of Earth but below those of the ice giants of the solar system, Uranus and Neptune. An international team of researchers, led by Dr. Shweta Dalal from the University of Exeter, found that the exoplanets were orbiting star HD 48498, which is located around 55 light-years away from Earth. The planets travel around their star in 7, 38, and 151 Earth days, respectively. The study describing these findings appeared in the journal MinRes on the 24th of June 2024. The coolest thing here is that the outermost exoplanet candidate orbits in the habitable zone of its host star, and the conditions there might be comfortable enough for liquid water to exist on the surface without boiling or freezing. Such habitable regions around stars are also known as the Goldilocks zone and are believed to be ideal for potentially supporting life. Another reason this discovery is so important is that the orange host star is like our Sun. But since it's an orange dwarf, it produces less radiation than our yellow dwarf star. It's also the closest planetary system to host a super-Earth in the habitable zone of a Sun-like star, which makes this discovery super exciting. It can help us move forward in our quest to locate habitable planets around solar-type stars. Who knows? Maybe this planet will be our new home one day. These potential super-Earths were detected thanks to the HARPS and Rocky Planet Search Program. Throughout a decade, the team taking part in this research has collected nearly 190 high-precision measurements using special equipment. By analyzing the spectrum of light coming from a star, astronomers can figure out whether it's moving toward us, this is known as blue shift, or away from us, that's what we call red shift. And still, to make sure their findings were correct, the team used lots of different methods and comparative analysis. Everything confirmed their conclusions. There indeed are 3 planetary candidates with minimum masses ranging from 5 to 11 times the mass of our home planet. The team also believes that the proximity of the star, together with the outermost planet's favorable orbit, can make this system a great target for future studies. Hopefully, further research will open doors for our understanding of planetary systems and the potential of life outside our solar system. Scientists have already discovered more than 5,000 exoplanets, which are planets outside the solar system, since the first such world was confirmed orbiting a Sun-like star in 1995. To find those distant planets, astronomers used different equipment, like NASA's Kepler Space Telescope, launched in 2009. Its mission was to find as many Earth-like planets dwelling in the Milky Way galaxy as possible. But it's not the only instrument used for searching exoplanets. Anyway, now let's look at the most exciting and promising of these worlds. Gliese 667 cc is a mere 22 light-years from Earth. But even though it seems close, it's still around 129 trillion miles away from us. The planet itself is around 3.8 times as massive as Earth and completes one orbit around its host star within 28 days. In other words, a year on that Earth-like planet is 13 times shorter than a year on our planet. Luckily, the star is a cool red dwarf, so the exoplanet most likely lies in its habitable zone. But there's still a chance that this world might be regularly baked by the flares coming from its parent star, which is not cool on many different levels. Kepler 22b is way further away than the previous world, more than 600 light-years away from our planet. It was the very first Kepler planet found in the habitable zone of its star. This world is larger than Earth. It's about 2.4 times our planet size. Sadly, we still don't know whether this planet is rocky, liquid, or gaseous. The orbit of Kepler 22b is similar to Earth's. It takes the planet 290 days to orbit its G-class star, which is kind of like our Sun. But this star is smaller and colder than ours. Another Kepler planet, this time it's Kepler 69c. It lies a whopping 2,700 light-years away from us. This world is also almost 70% larger than Earth. Researchers know nothing about its composition, but they found out that the planet needs 240 days to complete one orbit. This makes its position in its system like that of Venus in our solar system. At the same time, this world might be more habitable than Venus since its host star is a bit less luminous, 80% of our Sun. TOI 733b is a recently discovered world. It was found in 2023. It's out there, 245 light-years away from Earth, and needs just 4.9 Earth days to complete an orbit around its star. But the coolest thing about this planet is that it might have a massive ocean. According to scientists, the planet is likely to be completely covered with water. Does that mean there could be life on this super-Earth? Time will tell. GJ 1214b is located 48 light-years from Earth. This planet is a super-Earth, almost 3 times bigger in diameter and 8 times heavier than our home. It orbits around its red dwarf star faster than you can binge-watch your favorite series, finishing a complete loop every 38 hours. But it's not just the planet's size or orbit that's out of this world. It's pretty hot out there, with mind-melting 450 degrees Fahrenheit. But the coolest thing is that this planet is practically drowning in water. The sizzling temperatures and crazy high pressures on JG 1214b create some cool materials like hot ice and superfluid water. Superfluidity is something that happens in liquid helium when it's almost as cold as it can get. On Earth, water totally missed the memo about being superfluid because it needs ridiculously low temperatures and off-the-chart pressures to pull off that trick. Still, there's not much use in superfluid water. Even if you try it, you'll just get dehydrated. The super-Earth that's closest to us was discovered in 2016, and it's called Proxima Centauri b. It's located a mere 4 light-years away from Earth and has a mass remarkably similar to that of our planet. A year on Proxima Centauri b is short. It only takes the planet 11.2 days to complete a circle around its central star. Scientists discovered this world after they noticed that its parent star was slightly wobbling. They hadn't been sure what exactly had been happening there until they realized Proxima Centauri b's gravity probably produced pulls and tugs that caused these wobbles. Although the exoplanet is traveling in the habitable zone of its star, Proxima Centauri, it is exposed to extreme ultraviolet radiation, all because it lies very close to its parent star. Also, none of the telescopes that are currently working and exploring exoplanets are positioned well enough to capture the light from the atmosphere of this super-Earth. Most things there are still a mystery to us, even though we're talking about a planet that's really close. Super-Earth TOI 715b orbits a red dwarf, a star smaller and cooler than our Sun. At the moment, such stars remain prime candidates for finding habitable planets orbiting them. Those miniature rocky worlds have far closer orbits than those circling around stars like our Sun. But since red dwarfs are small and cool, the planets don't risk anything when crowding closer. They're still safely within a star's habitable zone. Experts say that TOI 715b might have once had an atmosphere thicker than that of Neptune, and now the planet could be in a transition state where it's losing its atmosphere. To confirm this suspicion, scientists need to do more research, and they might finally learn whether this planet is a watery terrestrial planet.